They had an episode. See, you can look up like old Lucky Strike ads like this.
Light up the lucky,
Light of time,
be happy, go lucky.
what light of time,
For the taste that you like, light up the lucky strike.
relax,
It's light up time.
The first cigarette of the day. Man, how good that tastes. And if it's a Lucky, it tastes even better. You know, Luckies can be depended on for better taste because they're made of fine, naturally good-tasting tobacco. Tobacco that's toasted to taste even better. Yes, it's toasted to taste better. Cleaner, fresher, smoother. So next time you get cigarettes, get better tasting Lucky Strike.
For the taste that you like, light up the lucky strike.
right now.
Light up a lucky. It's light up time.
Can you imagine if an ad like that ran today? Now, it got even better than that. There were Lucky Strike before that had advertisements that would say things like just what the doctor ordered, or 4 out of 5 doctors prefer Lucky Strike, right? That kind of thing. So Mad Men had a great episode that is absolutely based on fact. They've dramatized it, of course, but it's based on fact, and this really happened. Let's watch the long episode, might as well.
You know that poverty exists. It's very humbling to actually see.
And they do a really great job.
Consider it.
Great. We're going to get on a man of research.
Mr. Draper, Mr. Romano, you both seem more relaxed than I expected. You have some kind of surprise for the
Mr.
tobacco
Winter,
people?
watch the video.
Do my
Thank
own
you.
research.
If you're planning to continue with medical testimony, you'll only be inviting further government interference. We must police ourselves.
There's your slogan. The medical thing is dead. We understand that.
Yes, dead, an apt choice of words, considering the public is convinced that cigarettes are poisonous. If we can't insist that they're not, I believe my most recent surveys have provided a solution. We can still suggest that cigarettes are part of American life, or too good to give up. Almost appealing, an assertion of independence.
So basically, if you love danger, you'll love smoking.
We could put a skull and crossbones on a label. I love it.
Before the war, when I studied with Adler in Vienna, we postulated that what Freud called the death wish is as powerful a drive as those for sexual reproduction and physical sustenance.
Freud, you say? What agency is he with?
So we're supposed to believe that people are living one way and secretly thinking the exact opposite? That's ridiculous.
Let me tell you something, Miss Gutman.
Doctor,
Dr. Gutman. Psychology might be great at cocktail parties, but it so happens that people were buying cigarettes before Freud was born. The issue here isn't why should people smoke, it's why should people smoke Lucky Strike. Suggesting that our customers have what did you call it, a death wish? I just don't see that on a billboard.
So what if Reader's Digest says they're dangerous? They also said Bambi was the book of the century. There's no proof.
there's conclusive proof that none of these low-tar, low-nicotine or filtration systems have any effect on the incidences of lung cancer.
Just give me the damn report.
I think you'll find it very convincing.
Oh, I'm sure I will. You're the one who found all of our medical testimonials in the first place.
It's true, Mr. Draper, but
Has anyone else seen this?
of course not. It's your account.
Good. I don't want to hear about it anymore. I'm sorry, I just find your whole approach perverse.
Good luck at the meeting. I'm sure it'll be a quick one.
Sal, I'll take that drink now.
I just don't know what we have to do to make these government interlopers happy. They tell us to make a safer cigarette, we do it, and then suddenly, that's not good enough.
Might as well be living in Russia.
Damn straight. You know, This morning I got a call from our competitors at Brown and Williamson, and they're getting sued by the federal government because of the health claims they made.
Yeah, we're aware of that, Mr. Garner. But you have to realize that through manipulation of the mass media, the public is under the impression that your cigarettes are linked to certain fatal diseases.
Manipulation of the media, hell, that's what I pay you for. Our product is fine. I smoke them myself.
My granddad smoked them. He died at 95 years old. He was hit by a truck.
I understand. But our hands are tied. We're no longer allowed to advertise that Lucky Strikes are safe.
So what the hell are we gonna do? We've already funded our own tobacco research center to put this whole rumor to rest.
And that's a very good start. But it may not affect sales. Don, I think maybe that's your cue.
Well, I have been thinking quite a bit about this. And I mean, you know, I'm a Lucky Strike fan from way back, so.
I might have a solution. At Sterling Cooper, we've been pioneering the burgeoning field of research. And our analysis shows that the health risks associated with your product is not the end of the world. People get in their cars every day to go to work. And some of them die. Cars are dangerous. There's nothing you can do about it. You still have to get where you're going. Cigarettes are exactly the same. So why don't we simply say, so what if cigarettes are dangerous? You're a man. The world is dangerous. Smoke your cigarette. You still have to get where you're going.
That's very interesting. I mean, if cigarettes were dangerous, it would be interesting.
Except they aren't. Is that your slogan? You're gonna die anyway, die with us?
Actually, it's a fairly well-established psychological principle that society has a death wish. And if we could just tap into that, the market potential is...
What the hell are you talking about? Are you insane? I'm not selling rifles here, I'm in the tobacco business. We're selling America. The Indians gave it to us, for shit's sake.
Come on, Dad. Let's get out of here.
The bright spot is,
At least we know if we have this problem, everybody has this problem.
Gentlemen, before you leave, can I just say something?
I don't know, Don. Can you?
The Federal Trade Commission and Reader's Digest have done you a favor. They've let you know that any ad that brings up the concept of cigarettes and health together, well, it's just going to make people think of cancer.
Yes, and we're grateful to.
But what Lee Jr. said is right. If you can't make those health claims, neither can your competitors.
So, we got a lot of people not saying anything that sells cigarettes.
Not exactly. This is the greatest advertising opportunity since the invention of cereal. We have 6 identical companies making 6 identical products. We can say anything we want. How do you make your cigarettes? I don't know.
Shame on you. We breed insect-repellent tobacco seeds, plant them in the North Carolina sunshine, grow it, cut it, cure it, toast it.
Well, there you go. There you go.
But everybody else's tobacco is toasted.
No, everybody else's tobacco is poisonous. Lucky Strikes is toasted.
Well, gentlemen, I don't think I have to tell you what you just witnessed here.
I think you do.
Advertising is based on one thing. Happiness. And you know what happiness is? Happiness is the smell of a new car. It's freedom from fear. It's a billboard on the side of the road that screams with reassurance that whatever you're doing, it's okay. You are okay.
It's toasted. I get it.
So we see, you saw the ad, the original ad that we watched had the slogan, "It's toasted," and this is a dramatization which is pretty darn good about what actually happened. So what we saw then was a paradigm shift in advertising, which continues today. I'll try to work on that board thing. See if I can do that. A paradigm shift in advertising was taking place then, and a lot of it was because of government crackdowns on advertising. So again, a beautiful example of how legal rules and legal regimes shape what you see and hear, whether you realize that's what's going on or not. And so a lot of the reason that you see television ads and magazine ads and online ads the way they are is because of the law. It's because of how the FTC regulates advertising. So in the 50s, the FTC, the federal government in general, but through the FTC mostly, was cracking down on advertising. And the leading edge of the crackdown was, of course, the tobacco companies. And so what we ended up seeing was this shift. We saw a shift then. So these were words that the characters actually used, and these are actually have legal reasons. So remember, the German woman was saying that since the government is cracking down on us, we have to police ourselves. And today, this is known as self-regulation. And of course, the industries prefer this. So all of you advertising, PR marketing people, whatever industry you're working in, everybody wants to just say, no, we'll take care of the problem. And companies do a lot of things to try to reassure the government, no, you don't have to regulate us, we'll take care of it. So in the clip from Mad Men, for instance, the tobacco CEO complained. He said, we've already set up the Tobacco Research Center to prove that and that's self-regulation. The government didn't make them do that, but companies often will spend money on something like research in their field to try to show the government, no, you don't need to regulate us. We're on the ball. Another example of that is cigarette advertising is by law banned from television. And so that's why you don't see any cigarette ads on television. Liquor, hard liquor, there is no ban on hard liquor on television, but you never see it. Sometimes around Christmas you'll see an ad for Crown Royal because it's a popular gift, but by and large you do not see liquor advertised on television, even though there's no rule. So what happened was the liquor industry saw the crackdown on the tobacco industry, and they didn't want that to happen to them. So they looked at all of the federal regulation of tobacco, and they crafted their own rules that are very similar to the tobacco rules, but it's a self-regulation plan. So nobody is forcing the liquor companies not to put their products on the air. They have done that as a way, as a kind of olive branch to the federal government. Please don't regulate us. We'll do it ourselves. So we see today constantly this balancing act between when does the federal government need to intervene and regulate your advertising, and how far or what must corporations do to police themselves. So one way we see that happening is in this paradigm shift in advertising that's happening, that we see playing out in this clip. So they use this phrase. This is what is getting them in trouble. This is what's getting the tobacco companies in trouble, is making any kind of health claims. And so what we then see in, who's the actor, that guy, the lead guy? Right, so in his whole little aha moment, he sees that the solution to the problem is just to change the way they're doing it, to move away from any claim-based advertising to lifestyle advertising, which today most people would just call branding, but it's the same thing, it's lifestyle. So you're coming up with your, it's a car company, right? And Mercedes-Benz puts the ad on the air, and it's this sleek Mercedes slinking through the mountain on the Autobahn, and with the leaves whooshing behind it, the coolest Benz ever. What kind of claim is that? That it's cool? What does cool mean? Mr. Morgan?
I was gonna ask something else, but
What?
why would beer companies keep advertising as if hard liquor does not? Isn't it more of an action after you take it? That's the real cause. I mean, there is liver failure, but that comes from beer too.
I know, but here's the thing: the liquor companies. It's a choice. They chose to do that, and the beer companies did not. Why did the beer companies choose not to participate in that little bit of self-regulation? Because a lot of money's on the line, and they wanted to make the money. And also I think that the liquor companies were more frightened of being regulated by the government than the beer companies. Because beer is, the percentage of alcohol in beer is 4, 5, 6%, where it's a lot more with liquor. So, but in any event, even those beer commercials, do they claim that beer is healthy?
No.
Do they claim that beer will make you thin? Do they claim that beer will make your heart healthy? No. What do? It's babes and boobs, right? It's lifestyle advertising, right? The beer. I don't know how you stand it. These sexist, misogynist beer advertising. But anyway, so moving to lifestyle advertising, where you just depict the product and the advertisement makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, but you're not claiming anything. You're not claiming anything. And we say branding today, but it's the same idea of lifestyle. You're trying to sell a lifestyle, right? Right. You depict the product, right? You have people who have models with impossibly white teeth and the perfect clothes. Right, buy this product and you'll have impossibly white teeth and these beautiful clothes too. So it's a lifestyle. So the point is that what the tobacco companies found themselves at the center, the bullseye of the target. Right, and so there are certain things. So making any kind of health claims, it's going to draw the attention of the government and the regulators. Right. So he knew we just have to stop making any of the health claims and move toward this. Another ring on the pyramid would be financial claims. Buy our product and it will save you thousands of dollars. Or invest in this stock fund and we'll make you a millionaire. Any kind of financial claims are going to be very heavily scrutinized by the government, and you're going to be heavily regulated. Then another really important part of the bullseye vulnerable audiences. What are vulnerable audiences? Right. So any advertising. Remember when Michelle Obama became First Lady? What's her big pet issue?
obesity.
but specifically childhood obesity, right? This is traditional. The first lady has some sort of, pet thing that they do, that they advocate. And so hers is that. And sure enough, Obama becomes president, and within months, the FTC is cracking down on food advertising directed at children. And anybody thinking of going into the food industry, PR marketing in the food industry? Because they have really, really lowered the boom on all of the fast food restaurants and that sort of thing with their marketing toward children. San Francisco actually banned Happy Meals. But how could they do that? Wouldn't if they had a ban on Happy Meals, wouldn't that be unconstitutional? Wouldn't that be? What's the problem if they had a law that said no Happy Meals? It's viewpoint discrimination, because who makes Happy Meals? And only McDonald's. So it would be singling them out. So how would you cure that problem? Yeah, no children's meals with cheap plastic junk made in China. Right, or something like that. So, which is what they did. They wrote it as no little toys or something like that. No free toys.
So they still have like kids meals, but it just doesn't have.
It has to have an apple.
Yeah.
Right. It has to have granola. This is San Francisco, right? So yeah, but it cannot have it cannot have a free toy connected with the food. The food has to be sold as food. Why do you think?
Because the kids want the toys.
Because the kids don't care about the food, they want the toy, right? And so then what do the kids do?
They ask their.
Do they ask?
Hell, they kind of demand.
They whine and cry and throw temper tantrums, right? So anyway, it really has been a very noticeable crackdown on food advertising. So anybody who goes into that industry just know that. There's been a lot of litigation. Also at the same time, Obama, did you know that Obama is a smoker? Did y'all know that? And so because he has an interest in that, there's been a big crackdown on advertising for cigarettes too. And so you see, why is that? Why does the First Lady's interest and the President's interest affect lawmaking?
Does he influence it?
Why do they influence it? Why do President Obama's preferences affect how the FTC is regulating advertising?
Because they'll listen to him?
Because what?
Because they'll listen to him? Because
I can't hear you.
Because they'll listen to him?
I still can't hear you.
They'll listen to him, they'll hear him, they'll listen to him?
Well, lots of people listen to him and hear him, but why specifically must the FTC be responsive to President Obama's likes and dislikes?
Funding.
No, Congress controls it. Because why? Because the agencies, regulatory agencies, are under the executive branch, is why it's called administrative law, right? So those administrative agencies have to be responsive to the White House, and they are. We saw that dramatically in 2009 when the FTC and the FDA passed new regulations about cigarette packaging. What did they say? What did the new law say? There's been a warning for decades.
They have like pictures of black and lung or something.
They had to have these disgusting, gross pictures, right, of like rotting lungs and things like that. The warning has been like the Surgeon General's warning in words. So they passed that rule, the FTC and FDA together, because remember, you got you advertising and PR marketing people, you have two federal agencies to deal with. The FTC regulates your advertising, PR marketing, and the FDA regulates your labels, packaging, package inserts. So you got to answer to both, especially when you've got health claims. You really have both of them focused on you. So then it was litigated, and the tobacco company sued, And they said, you can't, this is, what kind of speech is the government making them do? What do we call that? If the government makes you say something, compelled speech. It's compelled speech. And the cigarette companies are saying, no, you can't force us to say something we don't want to say. And they won. And they won. And so the rule was withdrawn. And they had to withdraw it. But it's interesting to see how both Michelle Obama and President Obama, their personal agendas then influenced the way that the law was being administered. What are some other disputes lately having to do with food and advertising and packaging and marketing?
Well, I saw yesterday on like Fox 8 that they did a study on chicken nuggets and how much chicken is actually in chicken nuggets, and it's like less than 50%.
The rest of it.
Exactly. I don't know.
That's gross. Where's Jess? What, share it with the rest of the class. Don't have a private conversation in class.
Oh, no, I was
Tell the rest of the
just
class.
saying, like, I read something too about peanut butter, and like they allow a certain amount of hair and like other stuff to be in
That's the way it is with all food, though. There's a certain like percentage of like impurity that's allowed in everything, like chocolate. There's a certain amount of bug parts that are allowed to be in chocolate.
Yep.
Like it's for everything, because you can't
But
make it in such a confined environment.
The question is where to draw the line. And so, for example, we saw in the news this past week, the chicken industry lobbying Congress and lobbying the White House and lobbying the administrative agencies to loosen regulations on meat inspection. And they have upped the amount of chicken shit. I'm not making this up. We'll talk about it more when we talk about the case of the Poopy Burger later, when we talk about libel and trade libel. But so there's a lot, it used to be the rule was much tighter, and now the industry has lobbied, and all they did was gave campaign contributions to members of Congress, and the rules are being loosened. And so now there could be more chicken shit in the chicken that you buy at the grocery store. Right, Ms. Jessup?
I was just gonna say there's a lot of talk about GMO labeling.
Yep. What about GMO labeling?
If you have genetically modified organisms in your food, you can label it, but it's still pretty like unregulated.
Well, there are several states have tried to pass laws to force them. California is at the forefront of that movement. Are you in favor of them forcing companies to label GMO foods?
I think so.
I think most people are, and polls show that most people want them to too, but of course, what are the food companies going to do?
Respect.
No, what are they really, but literally what are they going to do? I know that they don't want it, so what do? They're what? They throw money at members of Congress and bribe them not to change the rules. Okay? Because what can happen is Congress can write a law, it's called preemption. They can preempt all the states from doing what the states want to do. What else? How about any of you ladies use Activia? Yogurt? What do you have against Jamie Lee Curtis? Don't you want good digestive tract health? Don't you want to beat yeast infections forever? Right? Wasn't that the marketing campaign? Wasn't that it?
And healthy digestion.
Digestive health, all of that stuff, right? Did you know the FTC made them pull all of those ads off the air? Because they were unsupported health claims. They're unsupported health claims. Do you know how many millions of dollars that cost that company? They roll out this national marketing campaign, and then they had to pull it all back and redo all the commercials. So now it's just, we're back to this. Activia. Right? It's just, be like Jamie Lee Curtis. So they had to, how to stop that? So they had to stop making the health claims and switch to lifestyle advertising. Right? See how that works? It's much safer. It's much safer. Same thing with, who was it who got busted for? There have been all sorts of federal FTC actions against companies saying things are organic that turned out not to be organic, or things that they said were light. What does light mean, right? And so, yeah, whatever they want. So all of those are the reason that all those federal actions, FTC actions are happening is because they're making claims, and so it's safer for all you PR, advertising, marketing people to move in the direction of lifestyle advertising or branding. Because what we have, and this is a legal term, this is in the bullseye, which is going to get the government's attention, and what we have outside the bullseye is puffery. That's a legal term, puffery. The best burger ever, right? The smoothest chocolate that will ever melt in.
Bless you.
Right. The coolest Benz ever. How do you define cool? So what do all those types of statements have in common? The coolest Benz, the best burger ever.
They're subjective claims.
They're subjective, which means they can't be
interpretive.
They can't be proved. They can't be proved true or false. And we're going to add a legal term to that. They can't be substantiated. Substantiation is the name of the game. They can't be substantiated. The government can't demand that you substantiate that. The FTC can't come to you and say, how do we know it's the coolest Benz ever? Have you scientifically researched that? You can't scientifically research the word cool. So, huh?
We want to see someone try it.
Yes. The thing that all of these have in common getting good at that. So that's the difference.
What if you did a survey and had research to back up the fact that it's the coolest bed? If you
I would laugh. I mean, what would you
I'm just
say?
wondering if there was a way for you to quantitatively or qualitatively prove that people
You
actually
can't
thought,
prove it, but all you can say is that it's survey. It's just a survey is what it is. You can't prove it, but you could say 70% of people polled agreed it's the coolest Benz yet. But that's just a poll. That's not proving anything. Because, you could do a poll right now, and I think I read this some months ago, 76% of Americans believe in angels. So what? Right? What does that prove? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People say stupid things, right? Something like 60% of Americans believe that the United States never landed on the moon, that it was all staged in a Hollywood soundstage. Right? So that doesn't prove it. But you can do that, and of course you will when you're doing PR, advertising, marketing. You will use surveys like that all the time, but it still doesn't substantiate something. To substantiate it means that you really have to, like for example with health claims, you have to have 2 independent studies to substantiate a health claim. If you say this pill cures cancer, you have got to have 2 independent, scientifically sound research investigations proving. Right? It's like the difference would be here, like when you see advertisements, and it's like, you have the old woman, right? She has the walker, and she says, I took a leave and my pain is gone. That doesn't substantiate anything. You can quote as many people as you want saying something, but it doesn't substantiate it. So these types of claims have to be puffery is your safest bet, your safest strategy in advertising, is to go with the more fuzzy, feel-good type things, you know. It's like, you know, snuggle. Okay, so they're going for the fluffy clothes and the stuffed animal and the little cutesy pie voice, but they don't claim anything, do they? They don't claim anything about that product. You're supposed to just kind of infer that this must be really cute and cuddly. It's a puffery. So one thing we have to deal with when we're talking about if the government's going to come in and start regulating advertising, well, we have a serious First Amendment problem that we have to deal with, because you're literally telling someone, you can't say that in an ad. What's that if the government tells you you can't say something? It's a prior restraint. It's a straight up prior restraint. So we got to figure out how we can get around the prior restraint problem. Now, one way we could say, you know, one thing that solves the prior restraint problem, or what helps us solve the prior restraint problem, is what you already know. There's room for regulation up here. So we already know that just as a First Amendment premise. We know that because it doesn't get the highest level of First Amendment protection, there is room for maneuver for the government to regulate. Right? But then we have to sort of quantify or see in a little bit more solid a way how that is going to happen, how that's going to work. And we can see how that's going to, what we have to do is figure out how that's, we have to go and look at the case law and figure out how that's going to play out. See, here's what we're talking about here. So the Oralic case is often cited. Commercial speech is speech that proposes a commercial transaction, aka advertising. PR and marketing falls under the same general heading. And so you know, in 1942, this is the first time that the court says anything about advertising, and they diss it. And they say it doesn't get any First Amendment protection. Then they have a discussion about why do we protect speech in the first place. Political speech is the most important. You're not going to chill advertisers' speech because they have money and money's at stake and money's a great motivator. And with an ad, it's easy to verify. You know, if you sell a product and say it gets stains out, well, it either does get stains out or it doesn't get stains out. Or versus a politician who says, I'm going to take back America. How do you go about taking back America? Is that, can you prove it out? Right. So politicians, all that hyperbole and stuff. And then, of course, we saw the Great Virginia Board of Pharmacy. So for all you PR advertising marketing people, this is your touchstone case. And of course, we know that they said that it does get protection. These three types of advertising are going to fall below the floor. And it expressly invites Congress to regulate it. Oh, this was good. So you know what TPM rules are. And all they did was they took the idea of content-neutral TPM rules, like for parades or those types of things, the noise ordinance, right? And they just imported that idea into First Amendment law. And they said, okay, so if we're talking about advertising, the FTC has room to maneuver, the FDA has room to maneuver, and TPM rules, there's room up here for TPM rules too. right? Mr. Bloxham, would you turn that camera just to capture this and then turn it back?
Yep.
Yeah, so just get this. And so Daniel, what we have here is our stair step with commercial speech here. We have room for regulation here. So we have the FTC, the FDA, and regular time, place, and manner restraints all operating in this space here in terms of regulating commercial speech. Another good thing an example of those types of regulations would be, well, all right, sign ordinances, for example. Anyone from North Carolina here? So you know Cary is. So Cary is a well-to-do, affluent suburb town of Raleigh. They have very, very strict sign ordinances. They can only be a certain size. They can't be garish colors. They can't have neon. They can't have flashing lights. And there have actually been some interesting disputes that have come out of that. So, but the idea is that if it is a content-neutral time, place, and manner regulation of advertising, it's okay. Another thing that I would also add here about Virginia Board of Pharmacy that's interesting is Virginia Board, another reason that it's an important case, is it helps protect, or this helped really, the court began really developing under the First Amendment, the right to receive information. Because think about it, Virginia Board is about, they wanted to advertise the prices of drugs. And in Virginia, there was a rule that said they couldn't advertise the prices. And so really what's at stake in that case is not so much the speech of the speaker, which is the drugstores. The court talks about what really is at stake here is the right of the consumer to receive that information. And so from Virginia Board on, the court has actually developed a very strong First Amendment right to receive information. Because think about, and the court talks about this in the case, if let's say you're a senior citizen and you're on a fixed income and you have to buy heart medication, well, knowing the price of the drug is very important information, right? So you need to, that case is really more about receiving information than the rights of the speaker. And we talked about corporate speech, and that was on the last exam, so don't worry about it. Oh, I got it. The flip. That's how you get it. All right, so from Virginia Board, then, you have to piece it together. Remember how we talked about, you know we talked about how when you do prior restraint, you got to talk about Nearview, Minnesota, and Pentagon Papers. When you talk about commercial speech, you've got to talk about Virginia Board of Pharmacy and Central Hudson. So they just announced commercial speech is going to get First Amendment protection in Virginia Board, and then in Central Hudson, they really get down to the business of figuring out, well, how is this going to work? And so let's use our imaginations for a second and say this. So in 2009, the Obama administration comes out with the rule that says the tobacco companies must put the disturbing, awful pictures on the packages. The tobacco companies file suit. It's a First Amendment suit. And so how's that going to play out? Just let your instincts guide you. What are they going to say? And then what's the government going to say in response? Yes? Just use your imagination. You're those tobacco company people in the Mad Men clip. So what's your objection?
That we've already put, the Surgeon General warning, and there's been all these studies. Now, why do we have to turn our package into a picture book?
Okay.
It's also very extreme in its example. It's not, there's a number of things that could happen from cigarettes, and you want us to just put the most extreme and grotesque stuff on our box.
Yeah, and that's a good place to start, is to, you know, how can the cigarette companies say that I guess what you're saying is what we're doing is enough. We're running the Surgeon General warning, and we're all in compliance, and that's enough. And how can we turn that into a legal argument? So it's compelled speech. It's the government making them say something that they don't want to say. Oh, I know. So just to take what you said, we've already got the Surgeon General warning saying this, and now you're asking us to do the picture. How does that say anything more than what we're already saying, right? Isn't that just redundant? Aren't you asking us just to do the same thing twice, right? How is the picture more effective than smoking causes cancer, right? And so you could argue that actually, in fact, I would attack the idea. I would say that the words are more effective because it's more direct and it gives you factual information. Whereas if you just look at the picture, you don't even know what the picture is, right? It could be chopped liver, right? So whatever. So yeah, you could try to attack it that way, and they did, and they talked about it's and it was forcing them to say too much, right? I mean, warning you that you could get cancer is different than saying you are going to get cancer, because that's not true anyway. Not every smoker gets cancer. Okay, so think about how some other words that come up in things that we've been talking about, like overbreadth, like when a rule is overly broad, or when we talk about it's vague. It's vague. Maybe they could try to somehow attack it on the, like say it has a vagueness problem. Like what pictures are we supposed to put in? Who's to decide? I don't know. So they have to figure it out. But the question, as a legal matter, as a First Amendment matter, it's like, remember when we said whenever there's a rule that deals with something like political speech, what kind of scrutiny is it going to get? Strict scrutiny. Strict scrutiny. And how do we administer strict scrutiny? The strict scrutiny test. The 3-part strict scrutiny test. And so what Central Hudson does then, Central Hudson invented the 4-part Central Hudson test. The 4-part Central Hudson test is basically the strict scrutiny test with one additional question at the start. And the one additional question at the start is this advertising, or is the advertising in question protected by the First Amendment in the first place? Why does that have to become the first question of the Central Hudson test?
If they all be yes.
Yes, all the answers have to be yes, but why does that have to be the first question?
Because if it's not protected to start with, there is no other question.
Right, because if it's not protected to start with, the inquiry can end there. But why do we have to have that question? Is there advertising that isn't protected by the First Amendment?
Yeah, you just gave the misleading and stuff, the exceptions that aren't protected.
False, deceptive, or misleading, illegal. Those aren't protected by the First Amendment anyway. So if the answer to number 1 is no, that's the end. It's not even protected by the First Amendment anyway, so who cares? But if we do, if we say, is it protected by the First Amendment? Yes. Question 2, does the government have a compelling reason to regulate it? Yes, because it's cigarettes. Number 3, does the regulation in question achieve that goal? And this is where the cigarette companies would attack and say, there's no proof that putting these pictures on the packages works any better than having the Surgeon General's warning, which is what they argue in court. And number 4, if we get to number 4, is it narrowly tailored so as not to squelch too much speech? But the way the cigarette advertisers won that case about, and this is sort of Mr. Watson's initial statement was sort of like what they attacked. Like they couldn't see any difference, and it was like, why are you making us put the picture, and you don't have any proof that the picture is better than the Surgeon General warning? So the case turned on question 3. And once the answer to question 3 was no, that was all. That was it. And it was over. And the rule was struck down as unconstitutional. So that's how that works. This is an interesting case because, what time do we have? What time is it? How many?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay. Watch it slow. This case is interesting because it came at a time when, there were 2 big energy crises in the 1970s. Now, y'all haven't had to live through one yet. You will. It's not fun. So in 1973, there was a war in the Middle East, and because the United States sided with Israel, the Saudis and other Middle Eastern countries decided to punish us by cutting off the oil spigot. And so, of course, prices went through the roof, and then we had shortages, then we had rationing. It was very common to pull into a gas station and they put up a sign that says, "Sorry, no gas today." Had to go through a time, or people would have to line up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes there could be a line a mile long. Or we did a thing where the national speed limit was set at 55 miles per hour everywhere on every street and highway in the United States, no more than 55 miles an hour. You can't, her eyes went like, you can't even imagine, right? None of y'all can't even imagine having to drive 55. It was such a big thing that there was a rock band even had a big popular song called "I Can't Drive 55." And so anyway, or another way of rationing was, like on Monday, if your license plate number ends with an even number, you can buy gas. On Tuesday, if it ends with an odd number, you can buy gas, and so on, like that. And that's how bad it was. So then things went on, and then 1979, notice the date on this case is 80. This is coming off of the energy crisis of 1979. So because the United States had illegally overthrown the democratically elected government of Iran back in the 50s, 1953, and forced them to live under a dictator, the Shah of Iran, who was our stooge puppet government in Iran, the Iranians finally got pissed off at the United States running their country, and who could blame them? And so they stormed the American embassy and took all of the embassy personnel hostage, and this started what became known as the hostage crisis, Iranian hostage crisis. This went on for some time. Again, it threw the world oil markets into turmoil. Iran withheld a lot of its oil off the market in order to drive up the price, and we went through all of that stuff all over again. The public service, and we had all sorts of, like on the light switch, everyone would put stickers next to the light switch. Don't forget to turn off the light when you leave the room, and all sorts of conservation campaigns. It's coming. Y'all will have to live through it at some point in your life, because these things go in cycles. So the Public Service Commission had a public service announcement, like give a hoot, don't pollute, Woodsy the Owl, like those types of things. And they were forcing the Central Hudson Gas Company to put it in everybody's bills. Now, if you are selling gas and electricity for a profit, do you want people to conserve? No. You want people to use, you want people to be greedy pigs, right, and use as much as possible. And that's what set this litigation off, right? Because they really felt like they were really being forced to say something that they didn't want to say. So it's interesting. It's a very interesting case. But the main thing for us legally is it gives us the 4-part Central Hudson test. And then note taking here, we've already gone through how this works just now. Who drives a 4-ton SUV that only gets 17 miles to the gallon? You can be honest.
It's 22.
We get 15.
It's like 7.
15? What do you drive? A Winnebago?
Green Cherokee.
That's awesome. What do you drive?
Jeep.
I
Yeah.
Oh,
just
Jeeps
bought-
are horrible.
It's a really old SUV. Big ones.
Yeah,
Yeah, 18 to 20.
it's not good.
The big buzzkill.
On the highway? What do you get in the city?
32 miles per gallon.
Well, all right, well, y'all are gonna be hurting when gas goes above $4 a gallon again, I tell you. So again, notice in the decision, they said a substantial interest instead of compelling interest, but we know from watching the cases, it's the same thing. It's pretty much the same. And does it directly advance that goal? And it has to be narrowly tailored. You could just call that last one. So what's interesting to watch is the way the personnel on the court changed over time and how the philosophy changed over time. When the Central Hudson test was when they first started using it, they were using it to side with government, to say, yes, this regulation is okay, yes, this regulation is okay. But over time, they've gone in completely the opposite direction. Now, the court is so pro-business that they now use the Central Hudson test as a sword against government regulation, to strike down regulation. And most First Amendment scholars would say, because of the way that they're using the Central Hudson test to strike down regulations, that commercial speech is really kind of approaching something up here. The court is protecting commercial speech almost as strongly as it protects political speech. So here, that's my observation, and just to back up my observation, I took these cases. These are all similar cases. These are all very similar cases. In each one, the case that came through in the 80s, they used Central Hudson to support government regulation. In the cases that came through in the 90s, they used Central Hudson to strike down government regulation. And it has only gotten, they only have gotten even more consistent. I'd say this one's a fun case. This is like 44 Liquor Mart. That's another great case. 44 Liquor Mart and the Coors case are a lot like Central Hudson. They have to do with alcohol. And here, this might go back to Mr. Bloxham. Did you ask me about beer earlier?
No, that was that, but I did.
Mr. Morgan, this helps answer your question. So here was a case where the beer companies were starting to put the percentage of alcohol on the beer cans. And so then we saw some states outlaw that and say that you can't put the percentage of alcohol on the beer can. Why? If you had to run the Central Hudson test then and say, is the advertising protected by the First Amendment? Yes, it's just, there's nothing illegal about advertising beer. Does the government have a compelling interest in regulating beer advertising?
I think so.
Yeah, sure it does. What about, we don't want young people to drink alcohol, we don't want people to drive drunk, and there's a lot of alcohol-related deaths and injury. We call these vice regulations, anything that has to do with like alcohol, drugs, gambling, that kind of thing. So yes, it has a compelling interest. And then here's the question that they attack on. Does the rule in question, keeping them from putting the percent of alcohol on the can, actually advance that goal?
Well, it actually makes you buy.
What does it do? What does it accomplish?
People want alcohol at 5%.
Wouldn't that sort of be the opposite? You think putting the percentage on
So you're saying the government's argument would be it would help consumers decide which one they want to buy.
Right.
But you're saying that college students would want to buy the highest alcohol volume. Yeah. Which is exactly what the government was arguing, that what you're doing is and it really did involve people y'all's age. What was happening was the college, the frat boys were shopping, they were comparison shopping, and they were always getting the one with the highest level of alcohol. But of course the beer companies are going to say, wait a minute, no, you're thwarting the consumer. We're trying to help the consumer by putting the percentage there because you might want to buy a lower volume alcohol. Right? So that's what is argued. Right?
So who
the beer companies. The beer companies won. The court said this is like Virginia Board of Pharmacy. People, that information might be valuable to people, right? And so we shouldn't be thwarting the consumer by withholding that information. 44 Liquor Mart was the same thing for liquor pricing. You can say Virginia Board of Pharmacy, 44 Liquor Mart, and Reuben v. Coors are all about the price of some product and the fact that that is important information, right? Or here are the percentage of alcohol. So they used the Central Hudson test, again, as a weapon against government regulation and to side with the speaker. That's the most interesting one. Pass on that. And so again, they attacked it on the 3rd and 4th. They said also that it was an overbreadth problem. It's like when you get to the and it says, is it narrowly tailored so as not to squelch too much speed? It was saying nobody can put any percentage on their beer. It's overly broad, right? It wasn't saying like just in advertising to college students or, right? Because if that was the problem, and that was the problem at the heart of that case was college students, binge drinking. This one was depriving that consumer information to everybody, not just the target audience. So it was overly broad. Yeah, and 44, there's your case of 44 liquor mark, very similar. And so what we've come to see by looking at the case law over time is when there is a case of regulation on advertising that is being challenged, the court tends to start out at the very beginning, put all the burden of proof on the government. Yeah, no, I already said that. You have justices like Scalia and Thomas, and strike this. This was a case that ended up being moot because it ended up being settled out of court. You can just put a strike. Or what you can just say is, forget the case and just say that courts tend to treat PR materials the same way, like a press release, the same way they would advertising. So whether you're doing PR or advertising, it's all going to be about the same. Okay. All right, well, cool. Y'all are way ahead of all the other classes, so it's good.
So no class on Friday?
Really? That makes sense. And then they have.
We're not allowed, and I would get in a lot of trouble. I mean, I would like nothing more than.
So what if we all just don't show up? What do you think? So are we gonna be marked like there? Can you forget?
Yeah, you'll be absent if you're absent. Yeah, because all we did was we have like 4. Yeah, we really got into that easy stuff.
We're so.
See you. Cut the florals.